Yes,
meeting order.
to be official, as the acting vice chairman, I move we call the meeting to order.
So moved.
Second. Introductions, we've already done that, so.
Okay.
I think we had an idea to bring up some business of discussing some existing bylaws that other cities have, but based upon the chairman not being here and kind of his push, I think probably the best idea would be to revisit that at a later date, as it's kind of an initiative I know that he's kind of pushing and important to him, so I'm not sure we want to get into too much discussion with that, so maybe we'll just table that for a later date. So with that, any kind of new business?
Yeah, so new business, there are a couple of things that were brought to my attention, one by staff and one came up in Airport Authority meeting the other day. The first, it was about a year ago. I was looking at my notes earlier today. It was January of 2019 when we asked for a recommendation from the Industrial Development Board concerning some property on Nichols Avenue. They wanted to serve food, and it was zoned M1 light industrial. They wanted to change it to, I believe, the request was maybe B2. Don't quote me on that, but it was B something. I believe it was B2, and the Industrial Development Board kind of coveting the very small amount of M1 that we have. It's hardly ever that anybody asks to zone something, M1. I'll call it down zoning maybe. We actually have had it happen further down Nichols this year, though, in a business that wanted to add some property. They're industrial type, and I think we rezoned something M1. Everything around it was M1. But what we did instead was we made the recommendation that say we, I'm the liaison, but the IDB made the recommendation to the city council to consider allowances for a restaurant in an M1 as opposed to changing that parcel from M1 to B2. And that made sense because if you like look at the airport property, that's where the large portion of our M1 exists now in the city limits. It's not unreasonable to have, say, a restaurant at an airport or a food service there. I mean, every airport has food service, and under the current zoning, even that would be precluded. So we added that allowance to M1, and I can't remember if there were some other restrictions on that, but we wound up changing our ordinance to allow that. So the Hunter came to me after yesterday's council meeting, last night's council meeting, and said that there was an issue that he wanted the IDB's input on, and it is also on Nichols Avenue. And I'll turn that over to him to explain what it is that the requester is asking for.
And just to kind of give a little, from a planning perspective, kind of what's happening around Nichols is ideal situation. I mean, the energy that's kind of happened there with the brewery and Hope Farms is something you really can't plan for. So it's becoming an attractive location. And I don't want to do anything to stem that kind of growth, but some uses are just not, with M1, are not applicable. So we got a request, and this is an current application, so I'm going to be kind of generic with this and not talk about specific property. But what they've requested to do.
Sure. You have a zoning request or a?
It is a change of zoning request from M1 to B2.
Okay.
And what this particular person wants to do, and where I really am coming to ask a question on, is adding a residential component to that. So,
Mixed use.
yes, you can think of that as mixed use. It's a smaller scale than a lot of what we might think of as mixed use, portico, for example, or something along those lines. Smaller scale, but it's still adding a residential component to M1. And from zoning, we look at uses that can work together, and M1 and residential to me can clash a little too much. We don't know what M1 will be, but everything around this except to the rear, which is zoned residential, but it's accessed from another road and a cul-de-sac. Those uses clash in my mind. Noise complaints, things like that, and introducing that use in M1 We don't allow that in M1. That's really one of our only zonings where, if you look at our use table, all residential is blank. There is no, so what, even allowing this to move through, and I think this is an easy solution, is just to deny the application because it doesn't meet the ideals of our comprehensive plan and kind of the way we're planning that area of town. So, but I wanted to get input here to see if that's agreement, if there's any other thoughts where maybe I'm missing something, and that is something we want to entertain. So,
Is it multi-story, single story?
it would be a two-story, so we're not, that's the problem with rezoning, straight rezoning from an M1 to B2. I try not to even look at what the current plans are showing, because that's for reference, and it may be exactly what the intended plans of that applicant is. But they get rezoning, whatever happens, get another buyer, plans change, anything that's within B2 is now applicable. So,
Okay. So our goal originally last time was to preserve the M1 because it's in a very limited quantity.
And you're saying you can't get into specifics, but I would want to know, is it in the middle of that whole M1 zone, or is it on the very end where it borders,
no, it is
residential now?
M1 on both east and west sides, and it kind of splits a little bit where M1 across Nichols, and the resident, there's that residential neighborhood kind of on the
patio homes that are straight down.
right. So, and then behind it, not accessible, is some residential homes, and I believe that's a
So we're talking the
slightly
east side
different.
of 98.
Yes, yes.
Multiple residential units planned, or?
Could be. I mean, that's by B2, that would be allowed.
Yeah.
Instead of kind of getting into their project, just thinking about what B2
Yeah,
could
yeah.
be. Yes, it could be a 3-story multifamily. I believe a hotel. It could be quite a few things that is not the intent of the applicant of what B2 would allow. So there is no B2 there. From almost a zoning standpoint, that doesn't make sense in and of itself.
Okay.
And it's enough for me to deny, but, there's,
So what are the alternatives other than just say no?
I think that's fine. If we don't want residential in M1, and I think that is very, that's one of those uses that can clash.
Okay.
And that is a very fair statement for us to make.
Yeah, just noise ordinances alone from the existing people down there could probably be an issue.
Does M1 allow a live-work condition?
It does not. There is no livable by the zoning, by that zoning table, use table. There is no residential component.
Would that
And
be
we
an
really don't have
exception
a
to make,
workplace.
though, as a live-work condition versus a multi-use, mixed use, or, I mean, I don't know what this person's trying to do, but
Yeah.
I was thinking if they want to own the Fairhope Brewery and they want to live above the Fairhope Brewery, they work, that would be a different condition than turning into apartments and whatever.
The problem is that you got to assume, you have to assume worst cases that B2 is forever.
Well,
and
I'm
that-
not saying B2, I'm just asking, is there an
okay.
exception to
Oh,
our
yeah,
M1
okay.
to allow a live-work condition in that?
Yeah, there's some really cool things happening outside of Alabama that
Yeah.
are, there's storage. I don't know if y'all seen in New York, they're building storage units. And they have a little loft inside, so they're 40-foot storage units, and people have their shops, and then a little kitchen and that and something like, so there's some really cool ideas, but, so could we do something? Yes. We'd have to be very careful about how that is, because you wouldn't want it just become condos with a, mixed use could technically be 3 stories of condos with one little place you could pick up a pack of crackers,
Yeah.
Yeah.
400 square
And
foot.
for me, what happens is, once they break that armor, they're gonna say, well, I want B2 here.
Right.
That's B2, I want B2.
Well,
And that's
and that-
happened at the other end of the street.
Yeah, and that's not
Already happened.
including B2. That's kind of if there was
Or
a
B whatever.
uniqueness to M1 where you can allow a very controlled method of sleep work. you know, but not the traditional apartments condo method.
So-
But that's a big project that,
The M1 provides you can have 24/7 work going on there. You can work shifts and
Yes.
have
Mhm.
clanking and banging all the time.
right. So, yeah, that's,
And there are a couple businesses that do that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's-
Hell, those mushroom farmers that go out there all the
Yeah.
time today, right?
Bottling next door?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, canning now.
Kenny.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can, you know, if that's something to consider in M1, I'll just be honest with our workload, we can't address that really quickly. But if we want to put that on a, hey, let's look at that down the road. But for now, if y'all agree that residential and M1 are not something we really need to protect, you know, we're going to have some that butt against residential properties. And we have some controls, you know, the true landscape ordinance requires buffers, so we kind of buffer the sound and things like that. But this wouldn't be. B2 and M1, that wouldn't be a requirement. So there's no real separation or no protections in that sense.
Do we need to call a vote to this, or how do we need to move forward on this particular item, Jack?
Well, I think what he was looking for was maybe you know, you can vote on a recommendation of your choosing, and if you want to tell them what you'd like to see. I mean, I think that's fair game. I mean, it's pretty obvious what you'd like, and but I mean, if you've done it, if you've convinced the board to vote, then that's fair game.
Backing on B2 is not appropriate. I mean, that just because of all of the other allowable uses, and maybe even, you know, residential in the middle of an M1 is something that if we ever do want to look at, needs to be done carefully.
So does anybody want to make a recommendation?
So would our
Yeah.
architect like to try and draft one?
Yeah, make a recommendation that we deny changing the zoning from M1 to B2. And that's the total recommendation.
I'll second that.
Okay. And just FYI, this won't make it to planning. I'm going to deny the
Right.
application, but that's,
So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then it has passed.
My only thing comment is if the person wanted to come back and ask for exception to a particular project, like they have a live work and you want to come back to us for something like that, I think changing the zoning altogether is for a specific use. I agree with you 100%. Changing zoning just opens up
sure.
a can of worms to anything at that point in time. We've seen it on too many projects right now where they change it for one reason and don't go through with it.
But I think it does give this board a little bit of purpose as well, in that if you want to consider, you know, looking at bylaws and looking at zoning regulation, allowances, what's allowed, what's not allowed, you know, I think that this would be a good body to study that some as well. I mean, you guys, I don't know if you know, he's got a super talented group of people right here. I think that, you know, and I don't think it has to be done before the next meeting, but, you know, in time, that it might be to develop some thoughts on that.
We have, you know, kind of allowed for essentially a variance on this last issue with the restaurant coming in across from the brewery, so.
Well,
there's
yeah,
some
well, we actually,
flexibility.
we put the allowance in the ordinance. We put that allowance in the zoning now, so it's,
Yeah.
so they didn't have to get a variance, because we
Right,
thought
okay, so
variances
it
were.
was allowed, but,
Yeah, right, okay.
so there's some flexibility, I guess, as
Sure.
far as, you know, what can occur in that neck of the woods. So,
Yeah. And that one's up, they still have to, they get a special exception from Board of Adjustments, which we just had one, and I was telling them before, again, last Thursday, small use and has never been used as an industrial. But that's the process. So there's another checks and balances on, is that appropriate use? So that's, you know, I'm kind of curious if there's an identity that we can do based on the location, where maybe that Nichols kind of gets its own unique, you know, market.
We're all
versus-
smiling because you weren't here when we
We had the sign made already.
went through all of this and had the warehouse district and,
Oh, that didn't.
They have a
we'll
logo.
talk about that another
Take off.
time. It was quite, it was interesting.
I wasn't on the board, I remember something about that, though.
Okay.
yes, there was,
Fertile ground.
as I recall, quite a lot of excitement involving that, and I think it could come back up at some point.
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah. It was
Would you sign in?
misconstrued as an entertainment
As a guest
district.
at the one?
Created a lot
Sure, I'm on
of
that.
excitement for
I'm
the
on third.
downtown merchants.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Nobody.
But no, I mean, just from a personal observation, it's great to see things that are going on in that part of town.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, it truly, in moving from the Birmingham area, I was able to see some of those areas that did the same thing, around the Regions Field, and some of those areas were warehouses that were dilapidated and it sat empty for 30 years and all of a sudden get revitalized. That wasn't quite exactly what happened here, but there's almost this, any zoning type that allows some more flexible use is where a lot of the new energy can, and kind of happens. I like, just from the selfish side of zoning, it's really interesting to see. So that's.
So one more item. After I said in, but it was actually not in the airport authority meeting. It was after it. There was mentioned to me that there had been some interest in, maybe from a developer to purchase airport authority land. Now, I've been riding the airport authority pretty hard to wean themselves off of the city. And, and it certainly, we would like to see some commercial development around the airport. And hopefully, if it was related to the aviation industry, that would even be better. But it was presented to me that maybe we could sell, don't quote me on this number, I want to say it was like 32 acres of land to be developed for residential use. And I just, I thought about it for about a day, and I just thought that's probably not the best idea I've heard this week. And, it's all M1 right now. And then you're going to have residential next to an airport. And then what's next? I mean, we could easily sell all that land and say, let's just develop it. We could sell it tomorrow, probably all of it, if we wanted to. But I don't think that's the best and most appropriate use for that land, for a number of reasons, even not the least of which is we're adding to our own overcrowding situation that we have in the city that everybody complains about. And I think that would be tremendous backlash. So, I would even ask for, and I'm a voting board member of the airport authority, but I would kind of look for a little bit of ammunition from the industrial development board, because that is all zoned M1 for a recommendation to not consider that. I pass it on. Y'all might disagree, so I throw that. Be open-minded, but I literally could not find the positives in that.
There's plenty of other areas for neighborhoods.
Yes.
Yeah.
We need to preserve that, in my opinion.
Totally agree.
Okay. Can I ask y'all to make a recommendation then?
Is it bordering, there is some of the property is bordering residential over there, isn't there?
Yeah, there's some across the street, big large lots. There's some a little bit to the south. Once again, they're very large lots.
Between the runway and 13.
It's between the runway and 13 is where
Right.
they were asking about it. Right where all the new east side improvements, about $10 million of improvements have occurred. And to me, that's prime
Yeah.
commercial real estate.
Aviation,
Yeah.
aerospace.
Yeah, exactly. And and it may not come tomorrow, but it's certainly not going to come if you put a residential neighborhood there. And that just opens up Pandora's box that I don't think we need to encroach upon.
Okay.
Yeah, so if I hear correctly, you're asking for
If y'all agree, I'm asking for a recommendation to-
For a reaffirmation that
Yeah,
we feel strongly that should stay in one.
correct.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay. So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
So
That's
the
it.
motion was that the Industrial Development Board strongly believes that M1 should be preserved.
Correct.
And not diverted to residential, or just.
Right.
Is that within the overlay?
Right.
That might be some more conflicts. The airport overlay has some
Right.
other issue,
Right.
that
Nothing-
contemplates
nothing we do is binding.
residential.
I can't imagine, I just can't see any
a
way it's
recommendation.
possible.
There you go.
Anyway, that was all the city had today.
Okay.
Go.
All right, any other Any other new business?
Move to adjourn?
Second?
All right. Meeting's adjourned.
Making the effort.